Baptist Podcast, a podcast exploring church principles. I'm Matt Hensley, pastor of Mayhill Baptist, a loyal fan of the Houston Astros, fair-weather fan of the Texas Rangers.
And I'm Kyle Bierman, pastor of First Baptist Church in Alamogordo, New Mexico. We're both pastoring fantastic churches in southern New Mexico, wading through the waters of church revitalization and trying not to drown. And Matt, your voice seems to have gone up a couple of octaves there.
It did. We're grateful for our partnership with the Christian Standard Bible and are oh so humbly proud to be the official podcast of the Word of God. After the show, we encourage you to visit csbible.com to learn more about a translation that is faithful and true with an aim to blend accuracy and readability the best way possible.
We are, wait, what was I supposed to do there? I don't even remember now.
Okay. So we were going to pause. We were going to pause right here and then have the clip of the gentleman
saying it's cold in here. Okay, that's right.
So however you want to get to the dumpster fire thing, because that's going to warm us up. So pause and then go.
Boy, that's right. It was cold in the exhibit hall, but we're going to warm things up because we are about to light this dumpster fire on fire. Matt, what is happening in your neck of the woods, my friend?
Well, I'll tell you what, it ain't cold here. No. It is hot.
No, it is.
And for us being in the mountains, it is still pretty hot. And we don't have air conditioning at the house. And so in the morning, we open up all of the windows and like wide open. And we hope that no bears or mountain lions or skunks or anything come inside. And then we wake up and there's like moss and flies everywhere. But no, anyway, we open up the windows and let whatever direction the air is blowing to come in, and you will wake up and it will be about as cold as the SBC annual meeting is. But then by the end of the day, of our lovely daughters who come in and out of the doors 1,000 times an hour, who you got to hear one of them in the introduction. That was not me on helium. That was Leah, our second oldest, who came on to do our little intro there, who introduced me so beautifully, cutely, and all of that good stuff. But yeah, they go in and out of the house 1,000 times. And I feel like my dad, because I'm like, shut the door. And because all of the cold air is going out, all of the hot air is coming in. And by about 3 in the afternoon, our thermostat will literally read about 84 or 85 degrees. It was so hot yesterday. So I was trying to draw up the bath for the girls, and it was hot in there, steaming, all of that kind of stuff. And the whole house got hot when I turned on the oven, even hotter. And I was like, you know what? Nope, we're turning that off, and we're going to the Mayhill Cafe, where we had a delicious meal. And it felt like it was about 68 degrees in there, and it was wonderful. And so what about Alamogordo? Because we're hot and we shouldn't be. You're hot and you should be. And I was down there a couple of days ago, and it is unbelievably hot, surface of the sun hot, because you're close to the devil there in Alamogordo. Tell us how things are going there.
Well, yeah, so as we record this on Thursday afternoon, we are knee-deep into Vacation Bible School. We have night 4 tonight. So tonight, tomorrow night, we finish up. Our sanctuary, kind of the front doors of our sanctuary face west. And as we are starting at 6 o'clock, so right as folks are coming in to check in their kids, we have our doors open with that west sun beating down. And I believe last night it was 102 at 6 o'clock. So yeah, boy, our foyer, I mean, it's like an oven out there. Not as hot as it was this week last year. This week last year, we were seeing 113, 115. So we'll take the hundreds. But as you experienced last week, and as you well know, being from the Dallas area, this is a dry heat, right? And that always means that it's not as bad, right? It's a dry heat. There is no humidity. But I'm convinced once it gets over 100, it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It is God hates you degrees, and it just doesn't matter whether it's humid or not. You're going to be miserable. But speaking of humidity, last week we took a little trip to Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And we both did. We went a little earlier and we left here. It was 48 degrees, about 0% humidity. My beard looked beautiful. It was wonderful. And then we stopped for the first time in Abilene, Texas. I opened the door and I looked at the temperature and I was like, oh, 93 degrees. That's not too bad. But I opened the door and immediately my beard just, went out like an afro coming out of my chin because it was 100,000% humidity and I couldn't see because my glasses fogged up. My glasses fogged up and I immediately burst out into sweating and I sweat through everything. And it was the beginning of a very hot and humid week. And I remembered why I am so thankful to be in the mountains, not just because it gets cold and, there's actually 4 seasons here, but because we have that, as you said, the dry heat. So even though it's 80 degrees here, if you got a little bit of wind, you're okay. In Dallas, it really doesn't matter because you're surrounded by asphalt. You're surrounded by humidity. Yep. You're surrounded by heat. And unlike last year in Phoenix, where you just felt like you were walking on the sun, here it felt like the sun was enveloping you in its hug of hellishness, goodness all around you. And so that was probably maybe the first thing that I noticed when we got to Dallas-Fort Worth. The next thing I noticed was right after Abilene, and we got stuck in traffic. And I remembered how much I hated traffic when we lived there. And here in Mayhill, the only traffic we have is the nightly elk crossing. But enough of that. Because why we were there was the SBC annual meeting. And we know that just about every Southern Baptist podcast right now, and even some not so Southern Baptist podcasts out there, are doing some kind of recaps or talking about what took place at the SBC. And so a lot of what we're going to say isn't very new, but it's going to be, of course, our train wrecky version of it. And so we thought we would take a moment to say a few things that we loved about SBC 18 or SBC AM 18, whatever it is, and maybe a couple of things that we didn't love. And I wouldn't use the word hate because that's not very nice. And I don't let my daughters say it. We just loved it less. And so a few things that we love, a few things that we didn't love. And so I've already shared about the heat and the humidity, the beard blowing out like a afro is the second I got out of my car, my foggy glasses, all of that good stuff. So Kyle, tell us, where do you want to start? With something you loved less or something you loved more?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I do love, and that is the Christian Standard Bible, who serves as our sponsor for this train wreck. We're grateful to be sponsored by them. You can find more about them at csbible.com. How do you like that? Which they had a fantastic selection of CSBs at the Lifeway store.
Brother, I already did our plug.
Did you really?
Yes.
Yes,
I did.
Okay.
Come on, man. But you could at least plug that coffee mug that's in your hand. That you got one of those, a CSB one, and I think you bought me one too, or my wife did, or somebody did. But cheers, yeah, I got mine. Way to go, Kyle.
We'll edit that out. That's fine.
since Kyle did that one, no, keep it in, baby. I'll go with what I loved. That is just another example of one of the things that I loved the very most, and that was towards the end of the SBC annual meeting, my beloved co-host Kyle Bierman stood up to a microphone and he gave a question without a question to Dr. Russell Moore. So here's what happened. The ERLC is giving their little spiel, and like we go through all the different reports, things that God is doing in and through their ministries and all of that good stuff. And Kyle decided, we kind of both did. We were talking through this a little bit. We had some stuff going on kind of behind the scenes with some people that were not, I guess we should say, did not have a I love Russell Moore tattoo on their arm. These were people that were not the biggest Russell Moore fans. They were not. And they were sharing some things together next to us that were not so nice. And we decided, let's not let them get to the microphone. Right. And so I talked to Kyle. Kyle talks to me, and we visit about getting up to the microphone and just sharing a little something. And, here's what it sounded like. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Kyle, before a watching world, stood up and completely turned the SBC annual meeting into a train wreck. And so, friends, that was definitely my best part, what I loved the most was Kyle standing in front of everybody, and all he had to do was come up with some question like, do you like the toilet paper over or under? Do you like crunchy peanut butter or smooth creamy peanut? I mean, there's all kinds of things you could have asked.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things you could have asked, and at least you got one question answered on Twitter, and that was at least from Steve Gaines, who told you who he liked or the song that he liked from Johnny Cash. So at least you got that. Give us something, Kyle, and do not again throw the Christian Standard plug in there. We love the Christian Standard Bible, and we would love to plug them 1,000 times on an episode, but we've already done it. So go ahead and give us something that you loved.
Yeah. So my favorite thing by far was the IMB missionary sending on Tuesday night. This is my third SBC meeting. This was the first time I was able to take part in that or be a part of it and watch how that happened. And I thought it was just phenomenal. That is why we exist as the Southern Baptist Convention, to send missionaries to the utter ends of the earth, many of whom had to have their faces blurred out from the big screen because they're going to places where either it's illegal to be a believer or if it's not illegal, it's not safe. And yeah, that was a phenomenal time. I loved it.
Yeah. And next to that, actually, I don't think really anything compares to that one. That might be one of the things that I loved less, was that the fact that it's usually towards the end of a day. And when anything goes behind, then that gets pushed even further. Yeah. And there's people that have kids in childcare that they have to either get them out or maybe you've got plans already or you need to be somewhere else. I would like to see that moved forward. So JD, if you're listening, make it happen, brother, because that takes me to one of the things, obviously, that I loved is the election of Greer, Vines, and Cabrera. Wonderful spirit of unity through all of those very I don't know if the right word for this is decisive, but a very strong majority on each of these, really showing the shift and the change towards a generation that is ready and willing to take the baton, not yank it out of the hands, but accept it humbly and learn from the people that came before them, and then chart the course from us from here. And so I love the spirit of unity there, as we saw in those elections. But really, and I think you might agree with this as well, is on every area that could have been divisive or divisive. The ERLC, there was a motion to defund it. The Swibbits, of course, there was some questions there with Southwestern. The election, of course, as we knew, there was some very contentious things there and some tense moments. That everything that could have been divisive or divisive, I never know the right way to say that, everything that could have been seemed to be overwhelmingly united. And so either motions that were rather divisive were just flat out, destroyed, or where you have something like elections that, as we know, were very contentious through the political party, at least on one side, that you see all of that when we got there was a spirit of unity, cheering, not cheering in a gloating way, I don't think, a celebration of what God was doing. And I think people saw that and saw what God was bringing together in a really tumultuous time in the SBC with some of the news that had been coming out. It was great to have 2 days that I would say, our slogan was testify, but I would say we were unify. We were coming together, and we saw a lot of unity through all of the areas that could have been divisive. What do you think? What else did you love? Yeah,
believe it or not, and let me clarify that Matt and I made our lists before we came on air. But yes, literally, my second thing that I loved says unity in what could have been divisive issues, and primarily the SBC presidential elections. What I put on there, there were some tense moments coming up. Some tense moments throughout if you want to call it a campaign or whatever. But in the end, a great sense of unity, and really, especially on the part of Ken Hemphill, just the gracious way that he handled the results of that election, and supporting Dr. Greer, and I agree. I'm thrilled with some of the stuff that JD's put out there, and thrilled with his vision for the SBC over the next year. I'm excited, and it was a great. We had several, as you mentioned, several items that we kind of joked beforehand that this could be one of those SBC meetings that we talk about for a long time, just because we as Southern Baptists kind of have a reputation for being somewhat combative at times, and there was really very, very little of that, and an overwhelming sense of unity in a lot of these issues. It was great.
And I genuinely believe that goes back to a call to prayer that was heated.
Absolutely.
I really, you could tell it was tense.
Yeah.
You could sense it, I think. But overwhelmingly, the conversations that I was having from people on various sides of the aisle, whether more Calvinistic or more traditionalistic, or pro more, not so pro more, kind of all over, the people that I was actually communicating with overall, though they felt that kind of tenseness in the air, they had a genuine sense of how can we come together. Yep. And I loved that about that, because I went into it. I'll be very honest. I was worried because I knew the world is watching, and we had enough bad news over the last 2 or 3 months that was the last thing that we needed, was World War III in Dallas. Yeah. And so I was glad to see that again, everything that could have gone wrong seemed to go right, and not just a matter of who was not just a matter of who was elected. Obviously, the people that I'd voted for won. But what I loved especially about that was not so much that they won, but that even in defeat, if you want to call it that, even those that did not win took it well and sought unity rather than, we're going to take our ball and go home. And so everything, again, that could have gone wrong went well. And there was, and instead of testify, unify would be a great way to discuss, and maybe give a slogan for that. And in light of that brings me to another golden, sorry, there was a message that just popped up from a friend of ours that said golden nugget. Jonathan, if you're listening to this, you're interrupting our recording session here. But another
happening in life, man.
Yeah, very important stuff is happening apparently. But we know coming in that my seminary had been embroiled in the PR and the press and all kinds of stuff. And it was just difficult for me as someone that loves Southwestern to come in feeling like we were kind of limping to the convention. And probably I would put it, I know it's probably bad to put it above the IMB thing or even above some of this unity thing, but seeing Bingham up there so graciously, kindly, that's not a word, I don't think, but kind, measured, even somewhat humorous in his handling a near impossible task well. Yeah. And I was very impressed with how he presented himself then, and then also in our Swibbits alumni lunch, that I was very thrilled with how he made me proud of Southwestern again. Yeah. And it nearly brought me to tears, and is nearly bringing me to tears now, because I love this school. And it broke my heart seeing what was happening over the last few months. And I think for sure right now, he is absolutely in the right place in the right time for he's the right person for this job right now. I had him for systematic theology. I hope to have him on the podcast here soon and to talk about some of this kind of stuff. And he's agreed to do that. But I think what is so great about him is he is a bridge builder, and he may not be the most dynamic. I mean, you listen to him. He's not, David Platt. He's different. He's very measured and subdued, but he's very gracious and very tender would be a good way to describe him, and is the perfect kind of counterbalance to what has been there. And so I'm thrilled with that. And with that, probably one that you might have written down is Bart Barber. Dr. Barber did a phenomenal job stepping up to the plate, and if you will, almost putting his neck in the guillotine for Southwestern and for the messengers there, after a motion was made that I would say was something that I didn't love about the convention, where they made a motion to remove the executive board of the trustees from Southwestern. He stood up and gave us some insight. We're not going to go into that. We're not going to delve into that too much, but he gave us some more insight into what was happening and why they made the decision that they made. And it really put us kind of in their vantage point to see the world as they were seeing it in the situation that they were put in. And I thought that was really helpful for people. And I dare say probably swayed a number of votes. And before you dive in here, if you want to add anything there, that also takes me to something that I didn't love, because right when he was done, Dr. Barber was also attacked verbally for the stand that he took right in front of his child. And so we've talked about how we were very united and all of that. This was a dark mark that not many people knew about, but those that knew Bart and knew the situation a little closer knew about. And that is something that breaks my heart to have a brother in Christ, whether I love him or not. And I do deeply love him and lean on him for advice a number of times. But even if I didn't love him, to have your son there when you're attacked, I think is one of the most despicable things that can possibly happen. However, what I also told Bart was what a privilege it was that his son, as bad as that was, what a privilege it was for his son to see what Bart has been teaching him through sermons and certainly through family worship and just raising a son, what he's been teaching him over the years. I don't exactly know how old his son is, but 10 some odd years, what he's been teaching his son, he got to live out before his eyes and see his dad as a man of integrity, a man that would do the right thing, even when it costs. And so that's the silver lining there, was he got to live out his faith, even when it was going to cost him. And it did. And so that was something that both I obviously didn't love, but I loved what came out of it, was that his son got a front row seat to a humble and a man of integrity, a man of honesty, and a man that lived out what he believed, even when it cost him. So Kyle, I've been talking a lot, so give us something.
Well, yeah. And I had the, just the Swibbits situation on stuff that I didn't like, just the fact that we were having to deal with that there. But you're exactly right. One of the things that you said about Dr. Bingham is that I think you said, he's maybe not the most dynamic of speakers, but his voice is very calming, very soothing. And I think in the report that he gave, man, you talk about somebody who stepped up to the plate. And if there's such a thing as a home run in that moment, Dr. Bingham knocked that out of the park for Swibbits. He gave the report that he needed to give with the certainly the weight of heaviness. That was obvious, but there was an optimism in the way that he was addressing not just the past, but looking towards the future as well. And I'll say this: so if you've not yet gone and listened to Dr. Bingham's report from Southwestern, I would highly encourage that. And even more, if you have not heard Bart Barber's speech defending the decision the trustees made and defending the fact that the executive committee of the trustees at Southwestern are going to be called to account by the full trustee board, you should absolutely do that. I know we'll give a shout out to our friends over at SBC this week, Jonathan Howe and Amy Whitfield. In their SBC recap, they have the clip of Bart's speech there. I think that's a great one for every Southern Baptist to hear, because you talk about someone who stepped up as a statesman when we needed it in that moment. Bart was just fantastic. Yeah, so just, the Swibbits thing was just a whole situation that I didn't like, that we were having to deal with that. I put in my didn't like the defund the ERLC motion as well, which failed almost unanimously. It wasn't unanimous. There were some, but overwhelmingly voted down. And
there's a wonderful picture side by side where it has, I'll throw the name out there.
Yeah,
Rager.
He made the motion.
Where perfect name. That's all I'll say about that. But he has his ballot lifted high in the air.
Yeah. and nobody else around him. Yeah.
The next picture is like a sea of yellow above his head. And it just was another, like I said earlier, was one of those areas that could have been divisive. You knew it was coming, There were rumblings of this from last year because it came at the wrong time last year. You knew that this was going to come, and it came pretty much right out of the bat. And that right out of the bat takes me to another one is we have the Committee on the Order of Business, and they give their agenda, everything at the very beginning. And there was a tense moment at the beginning, and perhaps one of the more closely voted things in terms of pro or against. And that was when we were told that Vice President Mike Pence was going to be here. And before either one of us say anything about this, let us also say that we greatly admire and respect Vice President Mike Pence. Absolutely. Second, we think it was a wonderful honor for us to even be asked to have Mike Pence, even on a video, share with us. And but there was a question about, for lack of better words, the optics of it. That we were told by the the Order of Business folks that he was coming simply to thank us for the work we were doing with the disaster relief and the work for the moral fabric of our nation and all of that kind of stuff. And there was a motion made that we I guess I can't remember the exact word, but basically disinvite him. Yeah. And that's a difficult thing to do. This is the second most powerful man in the government, if you will. He's right behind President Trump. And like I said, we love this man, great Christian man, and it thinks highly of the SBC. And but there was a motion there that we uninvite him. And I would say what I didn't love in all of that was not the motion that we're there to to share our beliefs, and whether we like something, don't like it all. I mean, we're there to vote. So I don't have really a problem there. But I wasn't a fan of, he is only coming here to thank us. And then it turns around the next day. We get there, 2 hours earlier. We wait in line for coffee. We wait in line for the bathroom, as you're well aware that I needed to go during his speech that went from, we were told 10 minutes to about 45 minutes. Yeah. And instead of a speech about, we thank you for, yada, 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 it ended up being a campaign speech. And there's really no other way to describe it. There was some great things and great lines in there, and some things that I loved about the pulpits being the most powerful. I don't remember his word there. I didn't write any of this down, but the pulpit being the most important. That's stuff that I say often, that we're grateful for our presidents, we're grateful for our leader, but change happens when the pulpits are rightly expounding the word of God. So he had some great things to say, and he said some great things, but it was a campaign speech, and that was neither the place nor the time for a campaign speech, especially when there was so much circling around Kai Bowman and Paige Patterson giving the annual sermon. His 10-minute speech that went to 45 minutes then pushed him back, and just about everybody in there had lunch plans, because Wednesday is when all of the various seminaries have their alumni lunches and all of that. We had scheduled for that at and we had to be there. And so we left, and we missed what I heard. I still haven't gotten to go back and listen to it, but what I heard was a fantastic sermon from Brother Bowman. And so that was something that I didn't love. I'm not going to say I hated it. I'm not going to say anything else, but I would have preferred us either knowing what we were getting in the beginning, maybe putting that at a different time, maybe having it video, because it pushes everything back, and it makes people make a difficult choice on going to their, what they've signed up to do or staying for this, because there was a very pathetic crowd for Kai Bowman's sermon, and it wasn't his fault. It was because people already had plans to go. Kyle?
Yeah, and I mean, full disclaimer, you said you weren't there for Kai Bowman's sermon. I wasn't there for Kai Bowman's sermon. You had a Southwestern lunch. We had to go pick our kids up from the childcare, the kids ministry, because that ended at right around lunchtime as well. So and look, to be fair, as you mentioned about Mike Pence, nobody that I've talked to said we disagree with Mike Pence himself. We have a personal issue with him. We don't want him here because we disagree with his stance. That wasn't the case at all. It was just, is this the proper context for the speech that we heard? And I think I'm on board with you as well, saying that the Southern Baptist Convention is probably not the best context for a political speech like we heard. So real quick, I know we're running a little bit longer than normal. I want to cover my last three things that I really liked. And and they're not deep at all. So one of them is the CP stage, not just because we were on it, but because throughout the whole convention, they had some really, really interesting conversations. Jonathan and Amy, they hosted us. They later hosted Russell Moore and Beth Moore and Matt Carter on a conversation about abuse. They had a conversation on Calvinism in the SBC. There was one conversation there with Mark Clifton about church revitalization. Just a fantastic thing that they have set up in the exhibit hall. And you can go back and check all those at talkcp.com. The free books and the exhibit hall, man, those are always a blast. Like, I mean, I walked home, I came home with a stack of books, and the exhibit hall is just so much fun. And then my last thing that I loved is just friends old and new. Just getting to hang out, meet some guys that we had interacted with online. We met some fans of the podcast for the first time, and were able to hand out stickers and visit with them. Just a blast. It's always easier for me to spend too much time in the exhibit hall talking with folks rather than actually in the convention hall voting. So I loved it. The extrovert in me was very happy.
I was going to say that leads us for me, probably my strongest opinion on all of this, that I won't even say that it was things I loved less. This is what I hated. I love Dr. Gaines with all of my heart. I think he's a wonderful pastor. I think he's been a fantastic president. But I was ready to rush that stage if he had us hold hands one more time.
Matt's introvertedness was not happy.
The CP stage is one thing. We had a few of our family members that were there. Your family members were there. We had some friends from BC&M that came and listened in, and I was nervous enough about that. But people I knew were right there. I have a very noticeable beard. I mean, it looks like my chin is on fire. And so when I walk around, somebody, Matt, yelling, like I start to sweat immediately. And so add that to, every time, like if we're going to stand up and sing, or we're going to stand up and pray, or I was waiting on Steve Gaines to make us do like a meet and greet. Like that's what I thought was coming, because any chance we could hold hands, so let's hold hands and sing Kumbaya, whatever it was going to be. That was at the very bottom of my list, was holding hands. But really, all in all, that's funny. From the pastors conference to the CP stage, which was a great opportunity. We're going to share a link down in the show notes to the Swibbits. Very difficult situation, in my opinion, turned in a very positive way, and a ship is sailing the right way now. The elections that we had, everything to me was wonderful, and not just in the sense that it went my way, because there were some things that didn't. But overall, a thing meant to be about testify, the go, stand, speak, all of that good stuff. I thought it was unify, and we were united, and I think it bodes well for our future. It isn't perfect. It never will be perfect, because it's filled with imperfect people, imperfect churches. But I loved also one last thing, and then we'll close, is a very strong push back to the local church. That it's easy for us to think that the SBC is going to be strong when the top is strong, but that's not the way the SBC works. And so as the churches grow and grow stronger and are doing more faithful work and disciple making and evangelism, which we didn't even touch on those two task forces, which were another highlight of the deal. But as they start doing that, then the associations grow stronger. As the associations go stronger, then the state conventions go stronger, and then on up. And all of that, my friends, starts with you. And so
I'll push back a little bit, and I'll say it is best when it's strong at the top. Because in the SBC, the local church is at the top. That's where the organizational chart starts for the.
I hate your guts.
For the Southern Baptist. It's right. That's the way we have a flipped church polity from a lot of folks. So yeah, it's so. By the way,
I was waxing so eloquent.
And I just came in.
I was about to preach, man, because that's my sermon this next week.
I know. We're running out of time. Hey, by the way, we do need to give an honorable mention at the SBC to President or I guess now former president Steve Gaines' singing abilities, man. I mean, he would just step up.
That isn't going to be JD Greer, brother.
Hey, I expect, all right. So if JD listens to it, let's be honest, there's no chance he's listening to our podcast on a regular basis. But
I'll make him.
If he is, JD, we expect you to just step up and start leading worship, because that was outstanding. I was blown away.
I think we'll be lucky if it's like John Jacob.
He's too legit to quit. So
yeah. It's getting tricky in here. Well, as much as I don't want to, it's time to hop.
No, there was no Wiley Drake. That was my final thing that I disliked. There was no Wiley Drake.
Why do you have to end it on such a sour note? Why do you have to end it on such a sour note? Wiley, we miss you. You better be back in 2019. Stop it. Stop it. As much as I don't want to, it's time to hop off the train. So thanks for taking time to listen in today. And if you're still listening at this point, we have absolutely no idea why you would. But be sure, if you are, that apparently you like train wrecks. So subscribe on iTunes. And if you liked what you heard, give us a 5-star review so these can keep coming. You can also visit us online at www.notanother.baptistpodcast.com, or on Facebook under Not Another Baptist Podcast, or on Twitter at NAB_podcast. Kyle, send us out.
Too legit. Hey, until next time, may your coffee be as black as night and as bold as the gospel you declare. And one more time, thanks to our sponsor, CSB.
This is now the fourth plug here. Now hiring a new co-host. Now hiring a new co-host. Kyle, can you give us a question? Give us a question as we wrap out. Just some random question.
Why would anyone listen to this? There's our question.
Amen. Have a good day.
God bless you guys.